What's important about squatting, it introduces important flexion into the spine. It takes these hips and knees and ankles into full ranges of motion. Cultures that do a lot of squatting, we see that osteoarthritis in the hip and the lumbar spine really drop to near zero. We're looking at how well you can move your center of mass up from the ground.
Dr. Kelly, I would like to talk about squatting. It is really a fundamental movement and a lot of people fail doing a perfect squat. So I want to know the significance of squatting and ability to squat.
Well, first and foremost, understand that when we say squatting, what we mean is not necessarily what you would do in the gym to get, to play cricket or train, but we're talking about being able to control yourself up and down, to be able to get up and down off a chair, to be able to, right? A single leg squat is stepping up on a stair or a high bench. That's a single leg squat. And so ultimately, we're looking at how well you can move your center of mass up from the ground or down from the ground. What's important about squatting or just even hanging out, the same squat we see all over the world where people just are waiting for the bus or minding or school kids playing, is that it introduces important flexion into the spine. It takes these hips and knees and ankles into full ranges of motion. And that's really important for the health of the joint. We want to maintain the surfaces and the loading of those surfaces. So from just a health around hip health, for example, we see that in cultures that do a lot of squatting because they're getting up and down off the ground a lot or just moving like that, we see that osteoarthritis in the hip and the lumbar spine really drop to near zero. And more importantly, fall risk drops to near zero. Because falling is actually a really gnarly thing for the human being. So suddenly when we just say, hey, can I squat? What we're really saying is, do you have access to all the potential range of motion that you should when we put it together? And squatting in strength and conditioning is confusing because you can do a lot poorly on two legs. You can collapse your arches, you can bring your knees in, you can reverse your back. And one of the reasons it's confusing is that squatting is a low power movement. There's not a lot of wattage, there's not a lot of power developed. So under very large forces, but low power, right, what we can end up seeing is that you can get away with a lot. And then when we transfer that, suddenly those poor techniques, because remember, I may not have access to my range of motion, I may not have control, I may be stiff, whatever the reasons are. Suddenly what we start to see is I have to do a whole bunch of wonky things. I have to sort of problem solve to get to depth. And then that problem solving doesn't work at high speeds. That problem solving doesn't work on a single leg. For example, ACL risk injury in young soccer players. One of the things that I want to do is I want them to be able to land and plant on a single leg and have that joint in the strongest position where they have the most access to their physiology. That's done with a straighter foot. That's done with good control of the hip. And if I just turn my feet out and slam my knees in because I went up and down in the gym with more weight, that doesn't tell me about how that skill transfers. And one of the reasons we want to work again on the squat position is ultimately we want to be able to get up and down off the chair, out of the wheelchair by ourselves independently. The number one reason people end up in nursing homes in the United States is we cannot get up off the ground by ourselves. So squatting can be a really beautiful way of developing leg strength and capacity. But we also see that we're able to continue to scale that model and scale that skill all the way up to, hey, I'm going to the Olympics, or I want to run further or do something with my body besides an activity of daily living. And what we find oftentimes, again, is that people are very competent to the depth of a chair. And that's because that's what we practice a lot. And as soon as we get out of our ranges, as one of my old coaches used to say, we fail at the margins of our experience. So again, here's a way to work on some of these positions. And chances are, I have rarely met a child who can't engage in squatting. And what we see is that if we stop using it because we're sitting in chairs and driving and never in these positions, suddenly when we want to become fit or we want to go faster, we may not have access to those positions.
So what will be your practical implementations which we can do if we are not able to squat in the full range, which you just described? What are some of the interventions we can take on a daily basis?
So remember, the expression of the thing is important, but more important is that we're actually in the exposure. So if you don't have anything to hold on to, for example, it's okay to squat down and it's okay for your heels to come up. But we want to try to keep our heels as close to the ground as we can. And so you can squat. You don't always have to go to your heels right away, but you can go all the way down and then bring your heels up. But don't turn your feet out. Try to keep your feet straight. So the first order of business is exposure into the more complete squat pattern. Again, we can say complete, not necessarily good or bad, but complete. The second thing you could do is hold on to something. So suddenly you can grip a wall, you can hold something and keep you from falling over. I think the reason that people can't achieve a full squat, usually it's because ankles are stiff and we don't have full hip flexion. But holding on to something and working and noodling and spending time in that position. The very first video I made for social media was in 2010. There's no Instagram.
Yeah.
YouTube is barely a thing.
Yep.
Certainly, there's not the iPhone camera. The iPhone doesn't have a video camera yet.
Yep.
It just has a camera. So just so we're clear. And what I suggested was, let's start spending 10 minutes a day in this bottom position of your squat. And what we see is that when people, I have lots of tools to restore people's range of motion, and we can floss and distract and mobilize, and we can do all these complex things. But the first important thing to do is to spend time in that shape. And so if you know that you have struggle with your squat, what I'll ask you is, well, how much time are you actually spending in the bottom position of your squat? And the answer is a few seconds every day during the workout. I touched it and I'm back up. I touched it and I'm back up. So let's go ahead and start spending time in these positions, and the body will adapt. I want everyone to hear this. Muscles and tissues are like obedient dogs. There's not an age where we don't adapt. There's not an age where our bones stop adapting, where our connective tissue stops adapting. It adapts a little slower as we get older, but muscles and tissues are like obedient dogs. And so if your tissues don't come around, it's because you are a poor dog owner and you're not being consistent in your exposure.
दोस्तों, ये वीडियो अगर आपको वैल्यूएबल लगा तो इसे लाइक कर अपने सारे दोस्तों से इसे शेयर कीजिएगा। इस चैनल को सब्सक्राइब तो आप कर ही लेंगे। चलिए मिलते हैं।